Hey guys, welcome to the 20th episode of Pure Grade Puroresu. Today we're going to be reviewing New Japan's joint show with Ring of Honor. This was their G1 Supercard from Madison Square Garden, which happened over WrestleMania weekend. I hope to get this out a few days earlier. Things just, got in the way and I was just being a bit lazy, to be fair. But look, it's finally here. I'm not too late. It's not like it's been like 2 weeks, like with my review of the Noah show, which was, a bit of an issue. But look, we're just going to get right into it. So I guess I'll give my opening thoughts. This was a pretty good show overall. But if you listen to my preview, you will know that Tyler and I, we agreed this should have been great. There were so many big matches on this card, at least from New Japan, where we were like, okay, if this isn't like an 8 out of 10 show, then it's going to be a bit disappointing. And to be fair, after watching this, I was left a bit disappointed for a variety of reasons. But I will still say there were a bunch of good matches, even a few really great matches. So let's get into it. We started off with the Honor Rumble, and okay, look, this is starting off terribly because, to be honest, I only joined the Honor Rumble like halfway through, I think, because the show started not super early, but I think I was still asleep at the time. And so I wake up and I'm like, oh shit, the show's on. And so I think I joined around the time that, I can't even remember. I think it was just when Ishii came down into the Rumble. And look, this is the Honor Rumble. I'm not going to spend too long on this. It was the usual sort of dull Battle Royale stuff we always see from the US. Sadly, Japan doesn't really do it any different unless they go like the full comedy route. Like I know that Noah and All Japan, they'll sometimes have Battle Royales like for the start of shows at like the start of the year or something, like anniversary events. And those can usually be pretty funny, but that's only because of the comedy. Here, there was nothing super interesting. It was just the guys who didn't get any big slots on the show. They just got to go in, get a few moments to show off, and then they're out. And the only real awesome thing here was that the fucking great Muta of all people, he showed up at slot number 30. And when I last heard of the great Muta, I think he was having like double knee surgery or something, and he'd already had his like, quote, last moonsault show over in Wrestle One, I think it was. Or maybe it was like a DDT show or something. Anyways, I just assumed he had retired. And so to see the great Muta come down and then face off with Liger, I was like, holy shit. I was getting flashbacks to their match where it was Liger versus Muta and Liger got totally destroyed, and then his mask got ripped off and he revealed he was Kishin Liger, and then he went crazy on Muta, which even though it's not like a total like great match itself, it's a really awesome moment in New Japan history. So yeah, it was really cool watching Muta and Liger face off. And then for whatever reason, ROH had their guy Kenny King go over because I guess he probably would have left the ring without actually being eliminated, and then he would have just hidden for ages, and then right when those two are in the ring, he runs back in, ends up getting the win. It's very deflating. Like, I'm going to assume this Rumble probably went at least, I'm going to say at least 20 minutes. I haven't bothered to check the actual time code because I'm very lazy like that, but I know that's how long the Rumbles usually go for the Wrestle Kingdom shows. So like, you just got to think, these fans, they're really hyped. This is a massive show for New Japan and Ring of Honor. This is the first match on the show, well, like the first proper match. I know there were some dark matches that we didn't get to see, at least online. Hopefully they'll come out eventually, because I think there was a Stardom match, which I'm really interested in seeing, and I think there was also maybe another New Japan match. Anyways, my point being, like, you just want to have like a good feeling of having Liger win, or even maybe having Muta win, just so like the fans who are there really early know like, oh yeah, this is the standard that's being set for the show. This is going to be a crowd-pleasing show. But instead you have the heel Kenny King win. Like, I've probably already spent way too long on this, but it was pretty disappointing. I didn't even see the entire match itself, and I'm already disappointed. That's how disappointing this was. So I can't really rate this. If I saw the entire thing, I probably would have given this like 2 stars, just because I already dislike Royal Rumbles and Battle Royales. Anyways, let's just move on. The first actual match on the show was Will Ospreay versus Jeff Cobb. So this was for Ospreay's Never Openweight title and Cobb's ROH World Television title. And this should have been the actual opener for the show. I love the dynamic of the speedy high flyer Ospreay, who also has some great strikes, up against the like just really compact powerhouse of Cobb. And I think with Elgin, this was sad news for me to hear, with Elgin leaving, and look, let's put aside all the bullshit of his personal life and what he's actually like, as a wrestler, he was fantastic. I think for a while, he was probably, I'm not exaggerating, he was one of the top 20 wrestlers in the world, probably around the time of like, what, maybe like 2016 to 2017, he was having amazing matches all over the place. I still remember when he first came into New Japan, I'd only ever seen him in Ring of Honor. He would always get shit on by the fans, and then he's having these amazing matches with like Ishii and Naito. It was just, like, my point being, I always get off on these little tangents when I'm trying to make a point, but my point being, Cobb, and it's funny because his history with Cobb and Elgin, Cobb would be a perfect replacement for Elgin because they're both sort of like, they're not small, but they're like maybe 5'11" or so, but they're really like well packed out. So they're great powerhouses, great monsters in that regard. And Cobb is like very, very similar to Elgin in the offense style as well, obviously. So I think, look, he's now got the openweight title, which was very surprising to me. I don't think anyone predicted that. So I would actually be really hyped to see Cobb come over to New Japan and fill that role of the Gaijin monster, which has now been left by Elgin. On another little off-note little thing, with Elgin, I really hope he stays in Japan. First of all, just because I think he works best alongside the Japanese style, and also just because I don't think he's going to get many bookings in the US. You know, like the Americans and Canadians, they've all, like the fans at least, have all heard about his shenanigans, and they're like, yeah, fuck this guy, we don't ever want to see him. So, you know, I think he probably should go over to All Japan. You know, that would be my guess. Like, you know, you can go and live out your dream of being Dr. Death Steve Williams by going to the actual promotion he became famous for in Japan, or, you know, Hansen there as well. And hey, you've got Yoshitatsu, so I think you probably crossed paths with him a few times in New Japan, so there's also worth doing that. Okay, now that I've got this really unnecessary tangent out of the way, let's actually get back to the match itself. So there's very good chemistry between these guys, obviously. It was great watching Ospreay show off all of his surprising power, and I think back to that Instagram video that he uploaded where it's his mother, I think, filming his father watching one of his matches, and he's like, you can't fucking lift him, Bill, he's too big, referring to Jeff Cobb, and then he gets him up, and it's like, oh shit, you can. Because if you think back to the Honor Rising match, the story there was that Ospreay, it was like, oh, Cobb's such a big dude, can Ospreay really get him up for the Stormbreaker? And there, he actually did, but here, he couldn't get him up. So even though he was showing off some power where he'd get to deadlift Cobb a few times, Cobb would always come out on top in the power and strength battles. And so Ospreay had to rely on, obviously, his high spots, his aerial and speed attacks, and obviously also his strikes, which have been improving very well like these last 2 years, because you think of Ospreay a few years ago, he was just the high flyer, but he's brought in so many great kicks and, you know, chops, and obviously, what's it called? I think the hip blade or something, that like tricep or like elbow smash to the back of the head. I love all of those. So yeah, Ospreay had his usual crazy split-second counters and insanely perfect flips all over the place, and there were a few usual melodramatic facial expressions and screams from him, but as usual, it was never anything major. Like, it did give me a bit of a laugh, but it was never something that actually detracted from my enjoyment of the match. Cobb's power moves and strikes were obviously beastly. It was always really cool to see Ospreay's like very sharp strikes and kicks, and then you have Cobb's own strikes, which are just very thundering and powerful and impactful. The match's pace very slowly increased, and then Cobb ended up getting the win with a tour of the islands. So yeah, this was a very good match. I was hoping for a bit more, and I was very shocked to see that Cobb ended up getting the win. I did not expect that, and now he holds both titles for ROH and New Japan. And I'm not sure what's going to happen with Ospreay, because I thought New Japan was really properly trying to build him up as the never openweight champion, but I guess it makes sense because the New Japan Best of the Super Juniors is coming up, and even though Ospreay has been the never openweight champion, they've never shied away from the fact that he is still technically a junior, and so it makes sense to get that title off of him so that he has actually something to compete for in this upcoming Best of the Super Juniors. So just to finish up, for that match itself, I gave this 3 3/4 stars. I thought this was very good. As I said, this should have been the opening match, but, you know, it wasn't. That's just what we have to deal with, but it was still a very good match. Now let's move on to the next match. This was technically the first pure ROH match. This was between Rush and Dalton Castle, and this was a 15-second squash match. Because what happened was Castle, he does his big extravagant entrance with his boys, and, you know, they've got their Peacock fans, but one of the boys accidentally drops one of the fans in the ring, and so the ref is like, oh, you got to get rid of that. So Dalton goes to pick it up, but then I think the bell's already been called, and Rushi just immediately blindsides Dalton with some drop kicks, and they're incredibly fast, impactful drop kicks. And so even though this was only 15 seconds, and it was very deflating, because I was at least expecting like maybe a 3 1/4 star match here, and, you know, it ended up just being Rush totally demolishing Castle, I did still enjoy it because Rush has like fantastic charisma. I've said before, like, people will criticize him and be like, oh yeah, he's not very good, but every time I've seen him, which is only a handful of times, but every time I've seen him, he's always been very, very exciting and interesting, and he looked like a total star here. So, you know, he looks good coming out of this match. And then Dalton, he actually ended up turning on the boys, and I thought this had happened a while ago, back when I used to actually watch Ring of Honor, like maybe 3 years ago or something, but I guess it hasn't happened. He's been with the boys for, what, at least 4 years, ever since I've been watching, and then he ended up turning on them finally. It looked like he was going to reconcile with them and sit on them as if they were his throne, but no, he's turned on them, so Dalton Castle is now heel. So that's something I'm slightly interested in. I always thought that Castle should have just been like a pure sort of babyface, but his gimmick of being, you know, the guy who acts all prissy and acts like he's, what's the guy from bloody Queen, Frank whatever, how can I not think of the dude from Queen's name, Frank whatever, look, he looks like him, so that's, you can easily play that gimmick up as being a heel. So I'm slightly interested to see where Castle goes being a heel, but to be fair, I actually would have appreciated a real match here. So I can't really rate this match. Let's move on to the next one. This was technically another pure Ring of Honor match. This was between Mayu Iwatani and Kelly Klein. This was for Mayu's Woman of Honor title. And look, this was not very good. This was very dull. Mayu was working really hard, but there was never really a spark here. Kelly, I'll just call her Kelly. Kelly was doing the story of trying to be all respectful. I haven't actually seen their previous matches in Ring of Honor, but I feel like I've heard people say that Kelly Klein back then was being like really aggressive and heelish. That's just that's just what I'm getting. And here she started off the match with like a very serious handshake, really laying it on heavy, like, oh, I'm going to respect you. And so that's also what made me think, oh, the only reason she's possibly playing up this really, respectful face role is that, it must have been the case in their previous matches that she was playing up being a heel. And so, well, spoilers, Kelly Klein ended up winning, and I think Ring of Honor were really hoping that the fans were really going to like appreciate Kelly Klein's character change, where it's like, oh, she was a mean old heel, but now she's all happy, and then she's crying, and she's won back the title, and she won the match in an honorable, respectful way. But the fans were not having any of that. They were, for the first case, they were dead for like the entire first half of the match. They slightly picked up in the second half as some big spots started coming out, but the chemistry between these two just wasn't very good. And look, I have to say, Mayu wasn't very good here, but I'm not saying that's because of her. It's because I've seen fucking Mayu Iwatani. I know she's amazing. It's mostly an issue with Kelly Klein just not being able to keep up with her. And like, I think back to that reverse Frankensteiner spot, Kelly Klein just sold that fucking terribly. It was awful. Yeah, this match, I think it was only 10 minutes. It felt like 15 or 20. It was really difficult to sit through. So I have to give this 2.25 stars. In the post-match, I didn't really get this. They had the Beautiful People, which I understand is Angelina Love and Velvet Sky. And they used to be in TNA. And I do remember that unit being maybe not popular, but it was over. Like people, like they did get a reaction. And so they return apparently after like 9 years or something, or at least 5 years. And then they've teamed up with, what's her name? Mandy Leone. And I believe they attacked Kelly Klein as well as Mayu Iwatani. And so, like, this did nothing for me. I don't care for this at all. This was like the first, like, okay, you could take Roosh versus Castle, the 15-second match, and be like, maybe that was the first misstep from Ring of Honor on the show. Well, technically, that actually had to be Kenny King winning the title. But for the actual main show, Castle versus Roosh was maybe their first misstep, but you could excuse that as being like, okay, they just want to take both guys in immediate big directions because Roosh looks really good coming off of this and Castle has a new direction. But then this is the first major issue of the show, where it's like, what is Ring of Honor doing with their storylines and their angles here? Their matches aren't even that good, and then they do just angles that no one really cares about. At least I don't care about the Beautiful People coming back and being like Allure or whatever it's called, and I haven't seen anyone else saying, oh yeah, I'm really excited for this. So who knows what's happening there. The next match was sadly another Ring of Honor match. This was Bully Ray's New York Street Fight Open Challenge, and leading up to this, everyone was talking about how it would be Flip Gordon. I myself also thought it would be Flip Gordon, but then I heard people saying, oh nah, he's not cleared for the show, he's got an injured knee, and then I heard people saying, oh, maybe it's going to be Suzuki, and hey, what do you know, it ended up actually being Flip. But before that, we got a very, very cringy moment with this rapper who's apparently like a nerdcore rapper or something. His name's Mega Ran. He came out to the ring, and it was I felt embarrassed to be a wrestling fan because the guy, he's making me feel embarrassed. He's like, you guys scream if you love wrestling. And it's like, some people were giving him some sympathy cheers, being like, oh yeah, this guy's totally going to fucking just drown if no one gives him any sort of support here. And it was just really, I can't say the word cringy enough. And then Bully Ray came out and he stopped him, and so that got a bit of a pop, even though Bully Ray is meant to be the heel. But yeah, so what happened was Bully Ray beats this random rapper up, that was good. Even if he was meant to be cringeworthy and annoying just so Bully Ray could come out and beat him up, I still didn't need to see that. That was 2 minutes of, it felt like 5 minutes of that guy just being out there making me feel embarrassed. Anyways, let's get to the actual match. So Flip Gordon, he ended up answering the challenge that Bully Ray put out, and there's a bit of history between these two. And Flip Gordon, he's someone that people were really into right before he came to New Japan. When he was in Ring of Honor, people were like, oh yeah, this guy's the next big thing. And at the time, I wasn't into him at all. I thought he was totally generic. And then when he actually came to New Japan and I got to see him show off more of his stuff, I was like, okay, this dude is actually really, really good. I'm actually into him. And then everyone else started shitting on him. So it's like, I've been on either sides of Flip Gordon, depending on what the mainstream opinion has been. And it's not intentional, but I think Flip's awesome. And he showed that off as soon as the match started. He was immediately flying around the place. He was actually getting great reactions as well. I was listening to a lot of podcasts and they were saying, oh, if Flip Gordon answers the call from Bully Ray, then the crowd's just going to boo and they're going to leave and go to the toilet. But Flip got a really, really strong reaction here. And I think people were underestimating how heavily involved Flip was with AEW and the Bucks and Omega and Cody with All In. And yeah, that I don't know if it's directly that or it's just Flip himself, but either way, he got a really great reaction and he deserved it. He was immediately impressing. But then Bully Ray, he had Silas Young and Shane Taylor run in, and they ended up helping him beat Flip down. But then Flip, in turn, he had the Lifeblood members of Juice Robinson and Mark Haskins run in, and then the match just became like a hardcore weapons brawl. But I actually thought it was done really well. I actually enjoyed this more than the triple threat ladder match for the world title later on the show, just because I thought every spot here was impactful. Like, I usually despise hardcore matches just because the weapons and, like, you know, the big spots usually never look impactful. But here, like, I'd say pretty much all of the weapon spots looked fantastic, and there's actually really, like, good general wrestling as well. Obviously, it wasn't like, you know, people going back and forth in holds and everything, but we got some good strikes. You know, Flip Gordon had some great kicks. I think there were a few, like, really impressive lariats from Shane Taylor, and Silas Young, he got a few moments to show off, like, his really surprising, unexpected agility and athleticism when he does that sort of, what's it called, like the I think it's the Asai moonsault, you know, and he does the headstand and the turnbuckle, so he was really good. Yeah, I actually ended up really enjoying this, and I actually ended up enjoying Juice, and I haven't felt this way about Juice for a very long time. Because I can't really explain it, but for me, he's just been missing that sort of babyface charm. And here, when he's coming down to assist with Flip and he's standing up to Bully Ray and, you know, firing up, for some reason, it's like, damn, there's that magic that I haven't really had with Juice for like 2 years. So yeah, I was really enjoying this match. The spots continued increasing. One moment that I was very shocked by was the triple kendo stick bashing that Flip Gordon got. His back was genuinely scarred the fuck up after this, and it was cheesy, but it was still very, very, you know, inspiring, I guess. You know, it's like very hype just seeing him stand up to Bully Ray and Shane Taylor and Silas Young, just scream in their face and be like, come on, motherfucker, hit me harder. As you can already see, it's like, no, Flip, look at your back. Your back is already destroyed. You do not need to be hit any further. So yeah, that was good. The match continued, and obviously Lifeblood, Haskins and Juice, they continued helping Flip out, and in the end, Flip got his 450 splash and he pinned Bully Ray, while Robinson and Haskins, like, you know, like jumped on top of him as they all pinned Bully Ray. So it was sort of like, oh, it's a team effort. So I enjoyed that as well. Yeah, there were a few creative weapon spots that didn't get me, but there are also quite a few that I really, really enjoyed and sort of worked into the actual pacing of the match. So I thought this was pretty good. But the fact that it is still like a plunder match sort of brings it down for me, because it's like I can't really respect these matches too much. It was sort of dumb fun. I did still enjoy this, so I'm still going to give this 3 stars. It's really sad to say that match was the best match on the show and that it was only 3 stars. Sorry, the best Ring of Honor match on the show, I should specify. So after this, we then moved back on to the New Japan goodness. We got Ishimori defending the Junior IWGP Heavyweight title against Bandito and Dragon Lee. Why did I say the Junior IWGP as opposed to the IWGP Junior? Anyways, this match, this was 9 minutes, but this was 3 3/4 stars. This was almost a great, like a full-out great match. This was very, very fun. This was like total car crash spot fest style. This was what I was really, really hoping for. Bandito and Dragon Lee, their exchanges were my absolute favorites of the 2 possible combinations. I really enjoyed Ishimori as well. You know, I wasn't really keen on him in the latter half of 2018, but so far this year he's been really impressing me, and I'm not at all saying that he was bad here, but I just think that I guess it's just because of, you know, coming from the same country, Bandito and Dragon Lee, they just had that level of chemistry that was not only creative, but it was very, very exciting. You know, it was just, they're going all over the place, all these complex holds and spots, run-on counters, and they're just doing it with perfect chemistry. It was very impressive. And as I said, Ishimori himself was great. He worked really well alongside both guys as well. The match was really just mindless fun, in my opinion. There was no real story. It was just non-stop action and fantastic impact all around. The one standout spot, if I had to pick one, and there were many, the definite standout spot here was Bandito doing a 2-man moonsault, like fall away power slam. That was insane. I've seen him do that to one person before, you know, just one person off the turnbuckle, and that alone, that itself is crazy. But he did it to 2 people, and it wasn't like it came off messy. It looked very slow, but that just added to it, because it felt like he was in the air for like 5 seconds before he finally came crashing down on all of them. And I believe Ishimori was the one who ended up at the bottom of the pile once they landed, so you got to feel really bad for him. And as Bandito rotated, it almost looked like he was going to fall directly on his face, or like, you know, on his head or neck. So luckily he didn't. The spot itself just ended up looking very good, and that really just captured the essence of this match. It was like 9 minutes. I don't even think it was 9 minutes. I think it was like 8 minutes 40, and it was just everyone running and getting all their shit in right away. And it's weird because this was like a 5 hour show, but you've got the matches like Mayu versus Klein. That's only going 10 minutes. You got like later on they had the tag title match and that was only 10 minutes. So did these guys really need to be that short for time? Did they really need to only go under 10 minutes? Because if this went like 15 minutes or hell even 20 minutes, this easily could have been a match of the year contender, because you saw what they did in 8 minutes 40 seconds or whatever. It was insane. So the big thing here is Dragon Lee, he ended up getting the win over Bandito with the Desnu Karada, something like that. The Desnu Kadora, I'm never saying that again, and it is, I've got the translation for the actual, move itself. It's a vertical suplex powerbomb. If you've seen Dragon Lee, you'll know the move I'm talking about. So yeah, this was tons of fun, only 9 minutes, and we have a new champion. And this was the result that I didn't think it was likely, but I did think it was possible. I really expected Ishimori. It didn't make sense to me for his reign to totally just end over in the US, away from Japan. But I guess that's not the case. Dragon Lee is now champion, but still, sadly, we did not get Hiromu come out and challenge. Should I just assume that Hiromu's retired just so when he finally comes back and returns, I'll actually be really excited, as opposed to just getting myself worked up for every major New Japan show just for him to never return? But look, it does look like they're obviously going to go through with the story of Hiromu, who's going to come back in time for the Best of the Super Juniors. He's going to challenge Dragon Lee at Dominion after winning it, and I'm pretty certain that's what's going to happen, but I don't know whether he would actually end up winning at Dominion, because I feel like New Japan would go the route of, Hiromu's come back from injury, so the fact that he could win the Best of the Super Juniors alone is itself a massive push upon return. But then it's like, but he's still been out for like a year, so it would make storyline sense for Dragon Lee to still, finally beat him, because even though Dragon Lee has beaten Hiromu in like their Best of the Super Juniors matches, for the actual title matches, he's never beaten him. So then it would be like, finally Dragon Lee can beat him, and you have the reason of, because Hiromu's been out with injury for so long. And then you can build up to Hiromu either finally defeating Dragon Lee at Wrestle Kingdom, or, which I think is going to happen, is Ishimori will end up defeating Dragon Lee for the title sometime after Dominion, before Wrestle Kingdom, and then we get Hiromu versus Ishimori 2 at Wrestle Kingdom, which should be another amazing match. So yeah, this was another very good match. Obviously, it was a New Japan match, so, you should expect those matches to be good at the very least on the show, and I gave that 3 3/4 stars. Let's now move on to the tag title match. This was between God, Tamatonga and Tangaloa, Sanada and Evil, PCO and Brody King, and the Briscoes, Mark and Jay. So this was for the IWGP Tag Team Heavyweight titles and the ROH World Tag Team titles. So, there are 2 championship teams and 2 teams who sort of just got into this match for whatever reason. So all the various combinations were being run through at the start, as each individual wrestler got a few segments to show off their signature moves in particular style. Mark Briscoe, I have to say, I didn't expect this, but now that I think back to it, he's always very impressive whenever I see him on the joint New Japan Ring of Honor shows, and here, he was totally the standout wrestler for me. I also thought that PCO and Brody King impressed, and obviously Tamatonga and Tangaloa, they're pretty solid now, I used to think they were bad, but as a tag team, you can't deny they're relatively good. But yeah, Mark Briscoe, I love his crazy animated character work, where he's like some sort of crazy redneck, always like slurring his like face and like making these crazy little screams, and then he's also just flying all over the place. He's got some really good power moves and strikes. He's just all over the ring. It's hard to not be focusing on him, because he's always in the camera's purview, just because he's always doing something really interesting. His aerial and like speed-based moves were just very, very impressive. Look, I'm just going to go on about Mark Briscoe for ages if I don't stop myself. As I said, God, they're very good too. Like, I used to think they were really bad. As individuals, they've really progressed, and as a team, I do have to say they're probably the most like deserving team to hold both the titles, even though like I do get myself worked up, because I'm like, come on, like New Japan, they really do not need to have like this random team already being 5-time tag team champions, considering that like Kojima and Tenzon are only like 8 or like 9. So it's like, are you really trying to tell me that God are at least half or even over half of the team that Tenkozi are? It's just annoying. But then it's like, but you can see how Tamatonga, he's very fluid in the ring. He's got some decent strikes, and Tangaloa, he's really been impressing with like how he's improved with his own strikes and his own power moves. And then they both work really well together, because Tamatonga's sort of the speedier guy, the sort of sneaky guy, and Tangaloa, he's just like a total powerhouse. And as people, they're also very, very entertaining if you've ever seen them outside of the ring. So that also makes them very endearing, and it's cool how they're they're technically Bullet Club OGs. Obviously Tamatonga is, and Tangaloa, he may as well be. He's Tama's brother, so he's technically a Bullet Club OG as well. So yeah, I ended up enjoying this match more than I expected. Sadly, Evil and Sanada, they sort of just ran through the motions. They would hit some of their signature moves and some of their signature tag team moves, but otherwise they were usually just like outside, not really doing too much. There was also an issue that with this being a multi-man match, and I have this issue with pretty much all multi-man matches, I just hinted at this with my criticism of Sonata and Evil. Teams would constantly just take turns lying outside the ring, waiting to just run back into the ring for their particular spot or their sequence. And that always takes me out of a match, just because I know whenever there's a pinfall, someone's just going to run in who's supposedly been down outside the ring in pain for 5 minutes, and then they suddenly get the energy to rush in and stop the match ending just at that one single perfect moment. As I said, PCO and King, they're pretty fun. King showed some really good power and intensity. And PCO, he got some pretty big spots to himself. I thought that his senton onto whoever it was on the apron, I thought that was going to be the most impressive spot I was going to see from this match. But then bloody God, they powerbombed the guy right outside of the ring, and it was great because with how the camera was, we couldn't see below the ring. So I was thinking, oh well, he's probably just going to get powerbombed onto Evil and Sonata and Brody King, who are probably just waiting there to catch him. But no, PCO just got fucking dumped on his back right onto the mat out of the ring. It was a brutal bump, and then he immediately powered back up, and I think that was playing I've never seen PCO before, but I think that was playing into his character, where he came down to the ring as he was a Frankenstein's monster, where he was being electrified to life. And so after he took this powerbomb, he immediately sat back up and was fuming. He's like, I'm gonna get you guys, but then he fell back. It was he just had adrenaline, but then the actual impact of the move finally hit him. So I actually ended up thinking this was a pretty good match. It was annoying that there was interference from Jado at the very end, but it did lead to yet another very cool spot, as there was a top rope powerbomb from God onto Brody King, and that's how they got the win. So I thought this was a decent match. Again, this was under 10 minutes, so if this got 15 minutes, this easily could have been a properly good match. But just because I have my usual issues with multi-man tag matches, I think they sort of detract from the wrestlers in the ring. It doesn't allow them to actually show off all their stuff because they've got to share the ring and the screen time with all these other wrestlers. I still thought this was a pretty decent match, so I went 3 stars on this. I'm not going to bother talking about, what are the implications of this match for the IWGP Tag Team title division, just because I've probably said this before, I don't really care about those titles. They've been really disgraced in the last few years with how they've been booked. They're not considered really big titles. They sort of just get thrown around to whatever big tag team is big at that particular moment. I'm sure the next time Ring of Honor has a really over tag team like they had with War Machine, that they'll come over to New Japan and then they'll hold the titles for a while. So who really cares about that? The only 2 things that are worth considering in regards to the post-match of this match were, first of all, Yano, he came down and he stole the titles, and that has since led to the booking of Makabe and Yano challenging Tamatonga and Tangaloa for the IWGP Heavyweight Tag titles. So, that's not, again, I just talked about how I'm not interested in this tag division, and then you look at that match being booked, and you can sort of understand why. And the other thing that was pretty big was that Enzo and Cass, the guys who used to be in WWE, and apparently they're both really difficult to get along with backstage, they quote-unquote invaded the show, and they started brawling with all the other tag team competitors in the match, in the post-match. And at the time this happened, okay, look, I'm going to admit it, I got worked. I thought this was a shoot because the cameras were not focusing on the ring, but you could see that there was some shit going on the back, and the commentators were looking really awkward, and it looked as if they were just stalling for time and, being just going over the match over and over, saying the same little comments and sort of looking to the back, sort of trying to figure out for themselves what was happening. And so I was thinking to myself, okay, wow, maybe this actually is a shoot, because I knew that Enzo had actually invaded a WWE pay-per-view or a Raw a few months ago and stood up and made a big deal. And so I wouldn't have been surprised if they were trying to do some shit like that again, because that sounds like what they're actually like. But then I was also thinking, but I thought I heard that Enzo actually hated Cass, or they had beef, and so it's well, why would they be together here? And then video came out, and you see the actual quote-unquote brawling that's happening is sort of just them throwing really worked forearms, is just as if it was a wrestling match. And so then it came out later that this was in fact a work shoot, so a full work. There was some bullshit where it's apparently the booking team from Ring of Honor didn't want this, but then head management did. And yeah, there's obviously a lot of drama with Enzo because he got accused of rape, and as I understand, those charges ended up being dropped. And obviously I'm not going to get into that because I have my own opinions. I'm not going to bring that to the forefront of my bloody wrestling review show, but I'm just going to say that regardless of that, as wrestlers, I was never into these guys. Okay, Enzo was entertaining on the mic, maybe every now and then, but then he just became annoying, and Cass was just a very generic big man. Yeah, they were over in NXT and they were over massively in WWE, but I do not want to see them outside of, the very campy, melodramatic soap opera style that WWE works. I don't think they're going to work alongside ROH, which, even though it is a bit, dull and soap opera-y at times, they still try to have some legitimately, impressive sporting matches. every now and then. And New Japan, obviously, they're massively into the sporting style. So I don't think that, if Enzo and Cass end up working for ROH, I don't think that New Japan would ever have them over. Maybe they'd have Cass over as a generic monster. But yeah, those are just my quick little thoughts on the whole Enzo and Cass debacle. This was when the second half of the show started. So for this, we had Zack Sabre Jr. defending the Rev Pro British Heavyweight title against Tanahashi, and this was set up because Tanahashi ended up getting a bit of a flash pin over Zack Sabre Jr. in the quarterfinals of the New Japan Cup, and I was actually expecting Tanahashi to win the title here, because I figured this would set up a rematch for the title at New Japan's UK show Royal Quest, and it would just make total sense for Zack Sabre Jr. to headline that with Tanahashi and then win the title back there. And, for the sake of spoilers, that's not what ended up happening. This went 15 minutes and Zack Sabre Jr. ended up submitting Tanahashi with, and look, just out of respect for myself, I try to never actually remember the names of Zack Sabre Jr.'s submission holds, because it's like, no, Zack, I know you're just trying to fuck with me. You're a very odd person and you choose these very odd submission hold names and you expect me to remember these 15, 20 word names. I'm not doing that shit. But anyways, I did think this was a pretty good match. It was underwhelming, which is sad to say. The crowd wasn't really into it for quite a while, and I think some people have suggested that was because they were really miffed by the bullshit of Enzo and Cass invading, because everyone's like, oh, was that real? Was that a work? Was that a shoot? And I think to myself, maybe it's just because we've seen Tanahashi versus Sabre so many times that the crowd just really genuinely wasn't that into it. So we started off with 50-50 exchanges, and then Sabre, obviously, he began targeting Tanahashi's arm. It's Sabre, he's a submission specialist, he's obviously going to target a limb. And look, I have to say, Sabre's holds out of nowhere, they started coming out and they were nice. And obviously that's alongside Tanahashi's very sympathetic selling, so it worked really well. And people are probably noticing, hey Lewis, why are you actually complimenting Sabre these days? You started off your show totally shitting on him and saying that he was like a bad wrestler. First of all, I never said he was bad, I said he can be bad. I said he's a great wrestler who wrestles poorly sometimes. But I think ever since then, the last 2 months, I'd say, he's been wrestling really well. He knows how to pace his matches now so that he doesn't have to make himself the entire center of attention. And that coincided with Tanahashi eventually ending up targeting Sabre's leg, and obviously we're getting a bit of a dual, mirroring limb work there, with Tanahashi trying to set Sabre up for the Texas Clover hold, and he did lock that in a few times, and I've heard some people criticize the way that Tanahashi applies this hold, but I think it always looks fantastic. And this is one of the few moments where I'll actually compliment Zack Sabre Jr. on his body type, because I thought it actually lent really well to the Texas Clover hold here, because just the way that Tanahashi was able to contort Sabre's legs back over his back, it just looked really good. And obviously I always pop for the Texas Clover hold ever since it actually allowed Tanahashi to win the IC title off of Naito back at Dominion, I think it was 2017. So I love that move, and the match continued picking up as both men started trading their signature moves with strong chemistry. There was very nice drama with Tanahashi as he was desperate to avoid his arm getting locked into the second half of Sabre's ridiculous stupid Pringle hold, which was actually the hold he ended up winning the match with. I really enjoyed that. Sadly, Tanahashi ended up tapping out right when the match was really getting good, because it started off slow. We had Tanahashi trying to square up to Sabre's grappling and started trying to show, oh, I can actually deal with this stuff. Then Sabre starts overpowering him with his grapples, starts pulling out all of his holds out of nowhere. Tanahashi's struggling. He's bringing out his own big moves. It actually looks like he's in control, but then he gets caught into that ridiculous hold, and yeah, he tapped out. I was really expecting Tanahashi to get the ropes, and then the match would continue building from there with Tanahashi getting some really close near falls, and then maybe he'd get submitted, but I was really hoping he'd end up getting the win, because I think to myself, what is the point of bringing Tanahashi all the way over to the US, all the way over to Madison Square Garden, just to have him lose? I understand that Sabre is over in the US and the UK, but it's fucking Tanahashi. So many people came here to see people like Okada, Naito, Ibushi, and Tanahashi. Why not just send them the good feel of going home knowing, hey, we saw Tanahashi win a title at Madison Square Garden? Anyways, that's just me being a bit annoyed, because, obviously I love Tanahashi, hate Zack Sabre Jr. as a person, not as a wrestler. Sometimes as a wrestler I think he's okay, sometimes. Anyways, let's not get into that. I thought this was a pretty good match. I gave this 3.25 stars to about 3.5. For the next match, we had Tetsuya Naito defending his IC title against Kota Ibushi, and I found this very similar to their New Japan Cup first round match. And as expected, just like in that match as well, both guys would end up dumping each other on their necks quite a few times. And the only real botches I noticed were when both of them fell off the turnbuckle when they were going for Naito's Frankensteiner, and then again when Naito messed up his package tombstone piledriver. But other than that, I thought this was a low-key great match. I really enjoyed this. So obviously Naito, being Naito, he starts off and he's doing his usual cheeky LIJ stuff, you know, being tranquilo, trying to dictate the pace and messing around with Ibushi. And there was a very funny moment with Ibushi. He gets sent into the barricade by Naito, but as he actually collapses after being thrown in, we're actually revealed, oh, there's actually a man right behind Ibushi. And it turns out Ibushi was thrown into this guy who's like, you know, one of the ring crew guys. And then Naito got right up in this guy's face and was sort of like criticizing him. You know, obviously Naito wanted to commit to the moment to be like, okay, we've sort of messed up here. This guy's got in the way of our spot. So he was immediately like trying to criticize this guy, getting in his face. And it was really funny because the guy was obviously really awkward and probably pissed off because he's like, he doesn't care about wrestling. He's just fucking working, you know, setting this stuff up. And then he's got a wrestler actually trying to, you know, play the character in his face. He was not having any of that. You know, if that was anyone else, they'd be like, oh yeah, Naito, I'm sorry, they'd play along. But obviously there was this guy who was a bit grouchy. He probably had a long day trying to set up this massive ring for this massive show, and he was not having any of it. So after that, Naito, he was controlling like the rest of the early phase of this match. He was running through all of his signature moves, and he had his usual laid back attitude, and obviously that always makes it really cool when then you have the contrast of when his opponent finally fires up, which obviously Ibushi did end up doing, and then you see Naito running through his signature moves with an actual sense of urgency. So I always love that contrast. Ibushi, he would always look good with his very few and short comebacks that he would get, and obviously because it's Ibushi, he has fantastic strikes. He's one of those wrestlers where it's like all around he is fantastic. Like Okada, I think he's one of the greatest wrestlers ever, but I would not say he's anywhere near an all-round wrestler. I'd say Ibushi is the closest to that. He has a bit of issues with like selling, but I guess I'm talking about in terms of like pure offense. You know, Ibushi can do everything. He can do high flying, he can do power moves, he can do strikes, and yeah, he's just fantastic. So even though he didn't get too many moments to show off in the first half, whenever he did get those small little moments, he would always just immediately grasp them. He would look fantastic. The issue was that Naito would always re-establish control through a variety of his own signature moves just going back. So Ibushi, even though he would get some momentum going, Naito would always just, you know, rip the rug out from under his feet. I have to say, the spot of the match totally has to go to Ibushi with his incredible Frankensteiner off the apron. Like, it was really obvious that they were going for that just because of the way that both men were sort of just draped on the apron, very exhausted, leaning against the ropes, and then the camera was sort of moving into frame where it was like, you know, you could sort of see it opening up the view where you could see Ibushi off on the right side and you could see I guess the air between the ring and the barricade. So I was like, okay, they're totally going for a Frankensteiner here. And even though I expected it to happen, and it did, it was still fantastic because it felt like Ibushi was up in the air for like 5 seconds just by the way he jumped away from the ring apron, but still managed to catch Naito as Naito ran towards him. And then he just flipped Naito over him. God, it looked really good, and the crowd popped massively for that. So yeah, to me, that was the absolute spot of the match. I really enjoyed that. And as usual, back in the ring, you know, Ibushi, from that, he did get a bit more control because he got that big spot, but then Naito once again gained control, went through more of his signature moves, and then he even ended up hitting a really sick running Destino. And you know, I love that move. It should be his actual finisher, but as usual, it did not end the fucking match, and I was just like rolling my eyes because it's such a fucking fantastic move, especially when you got fucking Ibushi selling it, because he basically almost lands on his neck, he folds himself in half, he makes it look fantastic with his bumping, but then of course for some stupid reason New Japan's like, oh sorry Naito, everyone's got to kick out of your running Destino for some reason, and I still never get why the crowds pop for it, because I guess maybe these people aren't as like, you know, hardcore New Japan followers where they're like, oh, that's the Destino. And it's like, if you've been watching New Japan for like 6 months, you realize the running Destino is different from the actual Destino. Anyways, I'm not going to get into that. The match was very cool. Then we had Ibushi. He started doing some Ibushi tributes. He did his sort of like, you know, pose where he like falls back, and then he did a few bomaye's, and obviously that's referencing how Ibushi, he really burst onto the mainstream of like the wrestling fandom, I'd say, when he had his really incredible match with Nakamura for the IC title at Wrestle Kingdom 9. And so it's like he's always tied to the IC title through that match as well as to Nakamura as a result. And there's also history with him having like not only Nakamura, who he looked up to and considered a rival, but obviously also Tanahashi. And he challenged for the IC title against Tanahashi back in, I think it was 2017, and he once again, you know, lost. And so it's like like he's got like those two people who have held the same title that he really wants, and then there's this person Naito who, even though he's sort of come around a bit, he still doesn't treat the title with respect. And so Ibushi, he was desperate to actually, put some respect on the title, and he actually ended up getting the win. He went for the last ride, and then he got the Kamigoye, and yeah, he gets the win. So this was a low-key great match. I have to give this about 3 3/4 stars to about 4 stars. Really enjoyed this. This is it's probably in my top 20 matches for the year thus far, I'd say. I did enjoy it a bit less than their New Japan Cup first round match, even though I technically give them the exact same rating. I just think that their New Japan Cup match, I feel like it was a bit more dangerous. I feel like the power moves were a bit more impactful, and I feel like the neck bumps were a bit more consistent. I feel like there were more of them, I should say, in the New Japan Cup match. So, even though they're still both on their own, own merit, they're both very good, I'd say even great matches. It obviously really helps that both guys have very good, I'd say even fantastic chemistry. They're usually always on point. They only had like 2 botches. Only one of them was really awkward. The other one was just sort of whatever. And my one issue, which stops me from considering these matches like 4.5 stars as some of their other matches have been, is just because I've seen them wrestle so many times now that it feels like they're just going through the motions, going through signature spots and, exchanges that we've already seen before. So it's like, yeah, I'm seeing you guys do this spot, but I've seen you do this 2 years ago with far more impact and far more significance, because I'd never seen you guys have that exchange before. So I guess that's what really holds me back from, considering these matches higher, because I've seen people on Cage Match giving their New Japan Cup match and this match 8.8 or 9 flat ratings out of 10, and to me I'm sort of in that range of I guess 7.85, or 8 or so, to be really needlessly direct or precise with my ratings. But yeah, look, it's Ibushi and Naito. They're some of the greatest wrestlers in the world right now. I don't think is it possible for them to have a bad match? I don't think that's possible, because even though I'm a bit down on this match, I still have to be some of their matches and spots were fantastic, fantastic chemistry, some great power behind pretty much all of their moves. Yeah, this was definitely my second match of the night. So now let's move on to the last Ring of Honor the last Ring of Honor match for the show. This was for the ROH World title. This was the champion Jay Lethal defending against Matt Taven and Marty Scurll. Now, despite the fact that this went 30 minutes, making it the second longest match, actually, was it? No, it was the second longest match on the show. I actually can't say that much about this, just because, I really got lost in the weeds with this match. It was way too long. It was almost 30 minutes. There actually were a bunch of pretty cool and creative spots, both with and without the ladders, so it wasn't just pure spot fest with weapons. There were also some decent wrestling exchanges thrown in there. But this should have been 20 minutes, max, maybe 22. There were just so many moments of dead air in between spots, and it's a shame because, as I said, some of those big spots were really good. Sometimes I'll watch a wrestling match with, particularly ladders and tables, and people will go through the ladders or the tables and they won't look that good. They won't look impactful at all. I think back to that table spot from the main event of WrestleMania, with whoever it was going through the table, and the table just bent. It didn't even crash. We didn't have anything as bad here. We did have a few moments where someone landed on the ladder and it didn't really look that painful, but that's just me, because the crowd themselves did still react, well live, and there were plenty of moments with people crashing through tables and getting hit with chairs and falling onto ladders, and they really did look impactful. And yeah, these guys, they definitely put their bodies on the line at moments, but it's just they weren't consistent enough. It wasn't we're getting a crazy spot every 30 seconds. It was you get maybe one crazy spot at 5 minutes, then you have a few all right spots, and then a lot of dead air, and then at the 10-minute slot, then you get another big spot. And yeah, that sort of formula, it just really wore me down. And even though I was wow, these are some good spots, I was really finding myself sort of falling asleep and being wow, I really just want this match to end. I just want to get on to the main event. So yeah, it's a real shame, especially because I've actually really been getting into Matt Taven. I haven't seen a lot of his Ring of Honor stuff, but every time I've seen him, every now and then, or checking out clips of him on YouTube, I've been really enjoying his heel work. I think he's very charismatic, and, say what you want, but I think I'm Matt Taven, I think that line, I think it's very good, just because it's so stupid. There's nothing, charismatic about it. It's just a really generic line of a guy saying, this is my name. And it's why would a wrestler possibly choose that to be his catchphrase? But that just works into him being a really annoying, sniveling little heel. And yeah, so I think he's very charismatic, and he actually is a pretty decent wrestler. This wasn't the sort of match where he can show off all of his aerial and athletic side, but I thought he worked pretty well. We have the usual issue of obviously people lying on the outside, just as I said with the multi-man tag match. You have people here who get injured and they're out for 5 minutes, but then they run back into the ring just to stop someone running up the ladder to grab the title. So we had some of that stuff. I actually enjoyed when Taven introduced the massive purple ladder, but I was really hoping the ladder itself would lead to a big spot. We did have the final big spot at the end with Taven pushing Lethal off onto the other ladder that had been set up across from the ring ropes into the purple ladder, but I was expecting maybe like someone to jump off the purple ladder and like hit a really big spot. Like, it's sort of like Chekhov's gun. Why would you introduce such a massive ladder and then not have like an appropriately massive spot? Because Lethal, it's not like he was standing at the top of that purple ladder when he fell off. He was basically, halfway up it just by how high it was, and he landed onto a ladder which was, like a few feet off the ground as well. So that wasn't like the big spot I was hoping for. It was still pretty damaging. It looked pretty, like I wouldn't take that spot, don't get me wrong, but yeah, there were just a few moments where I was like, okay, you guys are doing some big spots. You could have done a few more, and you could have done them, in way quicker, what's the term, doing them like, every now and then, more, I can't think of the fucking term. You guys, you know what? Who cares? This match was okay. I really wanted to enjoy this. If it was 20 minutes, I would have gone like maybe even 3.5 stars just because of how drawn out it was. I'm only going to go 2 3/4 stars. Let's now move on to the main event. And this was absolutely my match of the night. I thought this was outstanding. This was Jay White defending the IWGP Heavyweight title against Kazuchika Okada. And this is now my number 3 ranked match of the year for 2019. So, okay. Let's just get it out of the way. Yes, okay, there's a New Japan main event formula of a slow 10 minutes and then like a crazy final 10 minutes, and some people find that really, really boring. To me, I really enjoyed that. Sometimes I don't like that. Like with Okada versus Sonata from the New Japan Cup finals, I thought those opening slow 10 minutes did not at all work for the final like 15 minutes or however long it went. I thought that was just genuinely boring. But here, I thought it was really good because obviously it's slow, but you get to see a lot of character work from Jay White because he's controlling the match for like the entire first 10 minutes of the match. He, maybe you think it's boring, but there's a lot of like strategy behind it because he's trying to control the pace. He's trying to, annoy Okada, get inside his head, which would lead Okada to becoming, like committing overly and becoming overly eager to get at Jay. That leads to Okada making mistakes, and then Jay White can capitalize. He can jump on Okada, start wearing him down. And what really helped was, even though the crowd just sat through a 30-minute match, the Ring of Honor ladder match, which was maybe a bit dull, it did have some big spots, it really drained the crowd. And they were really drained for this match. And it didn't help that Okada and Jay White were going really slow for the first 10 minutes, but the crowd, they were still really getting behind Okada. To me, he was probably the most over person on the show, I want to say, just from what I saw. Obviously, I wasn't there live, but just from what I saw on New Japan World, I thought he was probably the most over. He was getting like cheers even when the match was totally dead, because these people, they were totally worn out from this massive 5-hour show, especially with all of the, dull moments we got from Ring of Honor, but they were still getting behind Okada. And so I was really glad to see that. I was like, please God, don't let this show, which has been sort of underwhelming, affect Okada's star status here. And luckily it didn't. So because of those reasons, even though the opening phase, like the opening 10 minutes, were really slow, I didn't find them boring because I was just trying to look for all of the storytelling moments from Jay White and seeing how Okada was trying to deal with this, because it's like Jay White is such a damn fun heel. He is so good. He has like very good facial expressions. He just comes off as like a really, seedy, sort of cheeky, sniveling, underhanded bastard. It's just really compelling. And then when you see Okada suffering against this guy who's so cowardly yet so intelligent, it's really confusing because it's like, damn, I want to hate Jay White, but he's so damn intelligent in how he preempts all of Okada's attacks and how he evades his attacks, because that's another thing I really enjoyed. I do not think Jay White gets enough respect for what he does in trying to evade and just outright run away from Okada's attacks. And I've seen some people complain where it's like, oh, Okada's going for his Rainmaker and Jay White just sits down, or Okada's going for the Tombstone and Jay White just wriggles out and runs over to the corner. Okay, yeah, it does make Jay White look weak, but guess what, guys? Jay White, the character, doesn't give a fuck what you think. He does not care. He's got, he's paired up with Gedo. He's cheated to win matches. He just wants to be the champion of this company. And okay, that sounds really generic, but it's like, what does he care if he looks weak, This is a strategy that allows him to not actually be hurt by Okada's moves, or at least not in the same way, because, oh yeah, maybe him sitting down from, to avoid the Rainmaker looks silly, but we know in kayfabe, Okada then cannot get the same impact from hitting his lariat when Jay White is sitting, with his ass on the ground. And so it may be silly, but it totally makes sense. It's also like if I can compare this to like esports, let's say, in esports, which is video game, like competitive video games, like in Tekken, there is a 60-minute time limit for the rounds, and it is a totally viable strategy to run out the clock. Usually, like, 99 out of 100 times, you never get that far, but when you get down to like the final 5 seconds, and if you have have a life lead where if you just, run away from your opponent, you'll get the win, that's totally a valid strategy. And okay, it can be a bit underwhelming, but there is also strategy in trying to avoid your opponent's attacks and, blocking their attacks and just trying to get away from them, Korean backdashing out of that. I guess only people who listen to Tekken will get that. But maybe think also back to, let's say football, actual football, soccer for you Americans out there. There's the strategy of, a defender who, when like the attacking team is in his team's half, he'll be like, okay, I'm just going to kick the ball out. I could try to pass this out to my team and then get the ball further up the field, but I'm just going to kick this out because then we get a throw in. Then our team can, regroup. We can actually get our positions back. And okay, it's not the most exciting thing. It's like the defender is basically admitting defeat by just kicking the ball out and then giving his opponent the time to be in control. But, as I just said, there's actual strategy to it, and that's just what I see with Jay White here. He's being underhanded, he's being maybe cowardly, but it's not like he's doing it out of pure fear. We've actually seen Jay White stand up to, massive wrestlers like Tanahashi, like Kenny Omega, and like Okada before, and he's beaten them, sometimes clean, sometimes with a bit of bullshit, but we know he can do this stuff, and that's what makes him compelling as well, because we know he is actually a great wrestler. He doesn't need to do these underhanded, tactics and, heelish stuff to win, but he chooses to because he thinks that that's what he needs to do. And not only that, but he really enjoys that, just those little smirks and those like cheeky little grins he gives as he does all of these like, stupid little things, like these cowardly little acts. It's so damn compelling. I'm just going to use that word over and over again, compelling, because that's what Jay White is as a heel. He is damn compelling. It also helps out that Jay White isn't just, storytelling and psychology. He actually does have the in-ring to back it up as well. Like, think back to all of his power moves, like his side suplex and his deadlift German. Those are fantastic. Like, I do think he has generally some of the best suplexes in the game right now. He's not like a massive powerhouse like Elgin or Cobb, but he gets so much damn power, so much damn impact on the mat when he drops his opponents from his suplexes. I think they're fantastic. And as I've already gone on about his, his facial expressions, which really add to the heel character that he's trying to portray, which, just adds another layer to all of his moves. Yeah, and his strikes as well. His strikes aren't as good, but he does get some good impact on them as well. So yeah, I really think that, I'm not going to say he's the total package, but I would say the majority of what makes Jay White appealing to me is just how unique he is. He's not doing the typical New Japan big match formula, like this match is similar to the Sonata match in the sense that it's, a slow 10 minutes and then relatively interesting, explosive final 20 minutes. But this match was far more interesting in the opening 10 minutes than that match. And I don't know, I just think that Jay White having such a unique style, it really does wonders against Okada, who's so used to working the exact same style for New Japan. And yeah, I just think the styles, the styles dynamic here was fantastic. As usual with Jay White's, latest big matches, he ends up eventually working the big New Japan main event style. And just like in his match with Ospreay, here he totally kept up with Okada. There were no botches. There were no ill-timed moves. He was perfectly on point with Okada. And this was very shocking because both guys are trading their big moves. It's very compelling. And then Okada manages to hit the Rainmaker. And, it's not the most impressive Rainmaker. And, that's the thing about Okada. One criticism I do have of him, sometimes his Rainmakers, his match-winning Rainmakers look kind of shitty. Sometimes there are amazing ones like the ones that Tanahashi and Nakamura and Omega and Naito have taken, where those guys who are taking the Rainmaker will put in so much effort to just flip themselves over in ridiculous ways to make the move look, just 100% gold. And then there are guys sort of like, Jay White and Zack Sabre Jr. and maybe even Sonata, I'd say sometimes, who they take that move and they sort of just fall back and it's like, oh, that's sort of underwhelming. And the crowd can sort of be deflated sometimes. Here they weren't for some reason. I was really surprised because I was like, oh, I thought you guys wouldn't react to that because it was such a sort of underwhelming Rainmaker, but the crowd obviously reacts because it's like, we just had some big moves traded and now Okada's hit the Rainmaker, this match is over. But holy shit, no, Jay White is added to the short list of now 4 people who have ever kicked out of the Rainmaker. So it started off with Tanahashi back in, I believe it was 2012 at Dominion, I want to say, or maybe it was the Wrestle Kingdom in 2013. I think it was 2012, and actually no, it was 2013, I think it was 2013 where he actually hit the Rainmaker, but Okada didn't go for the cover, so technically that's what counted as, him surviving the Rainmaker for the first time. And then in 2016, it was Naito kicking out of it at Dominion, and then it was 2017 Wrestle Kingdom with Omega kicking out of it, and now 2019 MSG, April 2019, it's Jay White. So yeah, even though, and I will get onto my criticisms of the actual booking of the story here with Okada getting the title back, but the fact alone that Jay White was given the Rainmaker and allowed to kick out of it, that to me shows me that, yeah, New Japan, maybe they're not in the best mindset of booking Jay White right now, but, you know, it's not like they're totally going to dump him right now. They are totally committed to him, because you don't just give anyone, like, look at that list I just said, Omega, Tanahashi, Naito. You know, where have those guys gone on to in New Japan after surviving the Rainmaker? They're totally all in on Jay White. Back to the match, Okada looked totally distraught after he realized that Jay White had kicked out of the Rainmaker. It was very reminiscent of his expression after he realized that Omega had kicked out of the Rainmaker at Wrestle Kingdom 11. And then Okada started firing up. He went from being sort of, you know, I can't believe this is happening, you know, dear God, why is this my life? And then he was like, okay, no, I'm going to get fired up. I'm going to totally go after Jay White there. And then Jay White reversed, like Okada, as I believe he went for the tombstone, he reversed that into the Bladerunner. And in the split second, I was like, holy shit. Like, Jay White is going to steal yet another match. But there was fantastic storytelling there with Jay White, because he was totally fucking flattened by the Rainmaker. Like, the fact that he was able to kick out at all was, you know, a miracle. He was not able to roll over and pin Okada. And listening to the English commentary team, I think it was Colt Cabana, he was like, just roll over, just get your arms over. And Jay White was selling this. His performance here was fantastic. Like, you could see his shoulders actually getting up off the mat, but the rest of his torso and the rest of his, you know, arms and his body and his head, he could actually not manage to get them to turn over towards Okada to actually make the rest of his body roll over for the cover. So it's just those other little details that Jay White gets across, which is so fantastic. And then it was like both guys, you know, selling extensively, and the crowd was totally into the match at this point. They realized, okay, yeah, the opening 10 minutes, they're a bit dull, but now, right before my eyes, we're seeing some big moves, some typical New Japan stuff. This is what I bought a ticket to see. And yeah, the match just continued picking up. Both guys were going for way more big moves. There were way more teasers of Jay White going for the Blade Runner. There were also some more great Jay White selling moments where both guys are trading strikes, and then Jay White, like, he's totally worn out and exhausted, which was, again, like another little detail he does fantastically. He looked totally drained, and he's trying to throw back strikes to Okada, but his strikes are just going at, like, you know, like a quarter, like maybe even like 1% of a kilometer an hour, you know. I don't know if that's accurate, but that's what it felt like, because Okada's actually throwing those strikes trying to hurt him, but then Jay White, his arms just have no energy in them. They're just like rubbing against Okada's chest. There was like, and even the crowd actually started sort of laughing a bit, and I was like, you know, okay guys, it does look sort of comedic, but, you know, buy into the storytelling here. Okada, he's proven to himself and he's proven to Jay White that, okay, he can get, you know, out wrestled, and like when Jay White is being underhanded and trying to control the pace and being heelish, but eventually at the end of the day, Okada is the better wrestler, and he's proven that to Jay White, and Jay White is realizing that right before his eyes as Okada is towering over him, and he can't, like, Okada's right in front of him. Okada's not even got his hands up to defend himself, and Jay White just can't get those strikes to actually do anything worthwhile. And so we continue getting some more teasers of Jay White going for the Blade Runner. There were counters on counters on counters. Okada was throwing up that massive fuck you drop kick all over the place. And then Okada ended up hitting a bunch of his short arm lariat rainmakers. And then he finally hit one big, proper, full swing, you know, proper wind up and everything, rainmaker. And that was it. And that was actually a good rainmaker at the end. And yeah, the crowd popped massively. Okada is crowned, I believe, his 5th IWGP title reign. And yeah, so this match was fucking awesome. I loved this match. I'm giving this 4.25 stars to about 4.5 stars. This is now my 3rd match of the year, right behind Okada versus Ishii from the New Japan Cup semifinals, and also behind Tanahashi versus Omega from Wrestle Kingdom. God, was it Wrestle Kingdom 12 or 13? I can't even remember at this point. But yeah, I thought this was a fantastic match on a show that was otherwise a bit underwhelming, especially the ROH stuff. Sorry to keep repeating that, but, you know, it does need to be said. This was a fantastic way to close out the show. I really love this match. You know, I've seen a bunch of people complaining about it being slow, and people are still complaining about Jay White's character. Like, to me, that's just absurd. Like, okay, guys, you're still getting Naito and Ibushi. You know, you're getting the same old stuff from them. Like, why can't you just appreciate how we're seeing Jay White put on such a different style? Like, you know, these are his matches. He's totally controlling these matches, but then he can still work the typical New Japan big main event style with the counters on counters and big moves and, you know, near falls and everything. God, I just do not get people that aren't into Jay White. You know, like, I can get, okay, you don't understand or you don't get into his character, but, like, to say that he's a bad performer when he's got so much damn psychology and so much effort into his selling, and his actual offense itself looks so good, and his chemistry with almost everyone is fantastic. Like, God, I just don't get it. Like, okay, I'll admit, I was a bit down on Jay White becoming champion just because his match with Tanahashi when he actually won the title, I wasn't super impressed with, but I think that's just an issue with Tanahashi, guys. Like, even though he had my match of the year with Omega, like, that's Kenny fucking Omega, one of the most athletic guys in wrestling, you know? Other than that, Tanahashi is really broken down. Like, his match with Zack Sabre Jr., I didn't make this criticism, but he really does look quite slow. And, like, when he's going through his offensive moves, like, they're nothing super impressive. Like, he's going for, like, a standing elbow drop and his senton and, like, maybe his dragon screw leg whips, and he's not putting like a big amount of energy into them, but we're mostly getting over, like, we're appreciating all of it because it's like, oh, it's Tanahashi. That's the dude that we love. We love his character. We love all the stuff he's done in the past. And, you know, and I'm not saying he's still not that he's not still a great wrestler, because he obviously is, but I think the majority of that is just like, you know, his pure babyface charisma and all the respect he's earned with fans over the years of just being an amazing performer. But I really do feel that that match that Jay White had with Tanahashi, that got him off onto a bad foot. Even though some people did really appreciate that match, I was down on it just because I wasn't able to see the actual good side of Jay White. But then Jay White has that amazing match with Ospreay and this even more amazing match. Like they're pretty much, I gave him the same rating, but this was like a slight bit better. I think we have to admit, okay, Jay White, you're a fantastic wrestler. You're so unique. We are thankful to have you. And yeah, I'm just trying to put together a birthday card to send to Jay White. I don't even know when his birthday is. My point is, look, let's just show Jay White some respect. Okay, guys? Thank you. Just before I give my final thoughts on the show and close out the review, I'll just go over what I think are the implications of this match. So I am still admittedly disappointed that Jay White lost the title. Even though I thought that the match itself was amazing, you know, the in-ring, everything I saw on screen was beautiful, there was no real story with Okada's redemption. Like, I loved the story of him going crazy and dyeing his hair red and coming out with balloons, as it was like, you know, it's almost like he thinks, oh, I have no personality outside of being champion. What am I doing? And then I love the story even further of him, you know, finally coming back out as the Rainmaker at Wrestle Kingdom, but it's still not enough to get him the win. And then it's like, damn, what does he have to do? But really, what has changed since Wrestle Kingdom to now? Like, he went through the New Japan Cup. He didn't really change anything up from what I noticed. He didn't bring out any new moves or change his style. He worked the same usual sort of, you know, slow opening phase, then big, you know, explosive, big move trading finishing stretch. Yeah, so I guess I'm a bit deflated there. And obviously, people were like making the strawman argument of people like myself saying, oh, you think that Jay White's going to be ruined by not winning at Dominion. Sorry, at MSG. And I myself haven't said that. I don't think Jay White is ruined. I still think he's going to be a big star in New Japan. I mean, he's already a big star. But my argument was always that who loses more? Okada, who is like, you know, holds all the records for New Japan and is their absolute ace. He's the guy who's going to be the face of the company for the next, like, you know, 10 to 15 years. Or Jay White, who, you know, who's just been established. He's had like a few lucky wins and just managed to win the title with, you know, a few shenanigans along the way. Who loses more? And I say it's Jay White. And that's not to say at all that Jay White is ruined by this. I just feel he had so much momentum going as being this easily hateable heel champion. And now you've lost that because he ends his reign with 0 defenses. Okay, yeah, he beat Ospreay, but, you know, that doesn't really mean anything in the kayfabe world of, you know, oh, who's actually like an actual challenger, because Ospreay was just a random one-off match at an anniversary show. Even though I do know that New Japan will actually end up building Jay White up again, right now it sort of just looks like he had like one lucky run with the title and that's it, because like, as I said, he ends with 0 defenses and now he's probably not going to be doing anything big for the rest of the year until the G1. I feel like if New Japan was really dedicated to being like, okay, Jay White, he's our new Kenny Omega, he's our new Gaijin star, he's the new Gaijin ace, they needed to at least give him a decent little like first run. Because I've seen people point out, oh, not every wrestler gets, you know, like a big run on their first title run, but okay, it's different with Jay White because you're trying to immediately place him to replace Kenny Omega, which is one of like your biggest stars, at least for the Western market, for like the last 3 years. So I would have at least had Jay White get maybe 3 defenses under his belt, maybe at least 2, I'll say, leading up to Dominion when he could have dropped the title to either Okada or Naito. And that's another thing. Having him face Okada so soon again after Wrestle Kingdom, it just felt too rushed. Like, as I said, it doesn't feel like there's anything that's really changed since then, like from the match. Even though I myself am, you know, over-analyzing the matches to shit, I couldn't really notice anything different in Okada's approach here. Apart from the fact, obviously, that at Wrestle Kingdom, Okada was a bit more aggressive and really direct and trying to go after Jay White. Here, he was a bit slower, but that actually worked to Jay White's favor because during those slower phases, it was when Okada was actually dominated. So yeah, if me, like myself, a massive Okada fanboy, if I'm struggling to really see like the development of Okada from the point of Wrestle Kingdom to now, then I think it's safe to say there wasn't too much of a, you know, very in-depth, complex, you know, amazing story here. I think New Japan really booked themselves into a corner in the first place as they had Okada go all the way through the New Japan Cup and win it in entirety. I myself, I would have had Okada go all the way through to the semifinals or maybe just the finals so that you could continue teasing Okada, almost making it back to the top but then failing again. And I think I said I would have had Ibushi have the win and then put Jay White over, because that's a massive main event in itself. Ibushi, massive star to New Japan, and obviously New Japan themselves think that now because they've given Ibushi the second highest title in the company. And Ibushi is not as important to New Japan to the point where it's like, oh, you can't possibly have Jay White go over him. It's like, no, that could have happened. And yeah, I just wouldn't have had Okada get to the spot in the first place, because then there's the issue of, like, okay, you don't want to, like, I understand why New Japan is like, we can't run MSG and then have, the most easily hateable heel in the world go over and, send the crowd home unhappy. So I totally understand that. But in the first place, they just shouldn't have had that. They should have had, okay, Okada, like, maybe Okada comes out and, like, makes a sort of, like, indirect challenge to Jay White. Like, it's not like he comes out, like, this is my fantasy booking, so you can ignore this stuff. But, if Ibushi ends up challenging Jay White at MSG, Jay White beats him, then Okada could have come out and sort of made a challenge to Jay White, and then the crowd would have been totally all into that, and maybe Jay White would have been like, I'm not going to accept your challenge, and then it's like, maybe Jay White goes through like Goto or Ishii at Dontaku or something, and then we could have had Jay White versus Okada at Dominion, and by then it would have been long enough where, time settled since Wrestle Kingdom with Jay White versus Okada, and it would have been it would have been directly a year since Okada has had the title, because that's another thing. I thought that, like, it still feels like it's only been like maybe 4 months, like, since Okada's been champion, because even though we had the Omega reign and everything, and we've had Tanahashi's very short reign, I'm still so used to seeing Okada with the title where it's like, oh, really? Even though I love Okada, why are we putting the title right back onto him? Why can't we just develop his character outside of the title for like a year, maybe even 2 years? He is so over, he is so protected that you can totally do that. You can continue building him up, having massive, runs in the G1, winning these tournaments, maybe like later, like maybe he wins the G1, then he loses his title challenge, maybe he wins the New Japan Cup next year and then he actually loses his challenge, just so you make fans absolutely fuming, like, goddamn, when is Okada winning the title back? And then you can really just milk that when you have him finally win the title, like 2 years after he's lost it or something. That's what I would have done. Again, I'm just a very stupid, fan who's just fantasy booking, thinking he's better than Geto. To be fair, I do think there's some things I could do better than Geto, but look, as I've always said, you have to give these things like 6 months. So let's give 6 months from now. Let's see where we're going. At least I think this is going to lead to Naito winning the G1, challenging Okada for Wrestle Kingdom. Is it 14, I want to say? So look, at least we've got that to look forward to. Now I'm just going to go through my final thoughts for the show and then we'll wrap up. So just as I said at the start of the show, this was a good show, but it wasn't great as expected, so it's disappointing, a bit deflating in that regard. I did expect there to be like at least 3 or 4, maybe even 5 great matches on the show. There were only 2, at least one of them was like totally blow away, like match of the year, contender level, so I did at least appreciate that. If I have to give a rating, I'd probably give this 7 out of 10, and it's like, it's crazy in this day and age that like we consider a 7 out of 10 show from New Japan to be disappointing, but that's just the bar they've set. I'm sure they'll actually have like straight out bad shows this year. They've probably had a few, like, those Honor Rising shows weren't the best. Pretty much everything ROH on the show was skippable. Some of the stuff was okay, like the tag title match, which had some of the ROH guys, and the Bully Ray Street Fight Open Challenge thing, that was okay. And that ladder match, that would have been a very, like, a decent, like a properly good, maybe even very good, or possibly even great. Like, is it too far out to say that? Like, it would have been a very solid match if it had not gone 30 minutes. Like, you give those guys a 20-minute time limit, they pack all those spots and sequences they did into 20 minutes. This would have been, like, maybe easily, I'd say, 3.5 stars, and then, just a quicker pace, getting up to like 3 3/4, maybe even 4 stars. Maybe I'm sounding crazy, but there was so much about that match that I enjoyed, and then there was just so much that brought me back down to earth and was like, oh, this is so boring. So I ended up going only 2 3/4 stars on that, and even that was a bit generous compared to what other people have been rating this. Some people have been giving it like 2 stars. I can't possibly say this was an outright bad match, because that's what 2 stars is to me. But yeah, so that was disappointing. I am at least happy we got 2 very good matches, 1 great match and an outstanding match. As I said, obviously New Japan, they always work really hard, especially when they go over to the US. Their wrestlers are like, okay, we've got to put on a big show. I was just hoping like some of those matches would go on a bit longer or make better use of their time. Yeah, it's annoying because this was a good show and it had one of my favorite matches of the year, and I feel so deflated. But yeah, look, people have been pointing out, hey, New Japan, you need to stop fucking working with ROH. Start working with like MLW. That's one I've seen thrown around. And, I'm not too familiar with the US indie scene, but look, it's been like, what, 5 years of working with ROH, maybe we should let them go. Like, okay, maybe it means we lose Skrull or whatever. Like, that's not a major issue in the long run. He'll probably end up signing with New Japan if he doesn't end up signing with AEW. So who really cares? Like, I just want to see some fresh talent. I just want to see, some mixed matches between the two promotions that aren't totally boring. I just want to see some more wrestlers who can actually captivate the crowd and not totally bore them. That's all I want. Anyways, so this is now the end of the show. So what are my shows that I'm planning on doing? I am still actually planning on getting out that All Japan 319 review. I know it's been like maybe even 3 weeks. Actually, is it close to, let me check my calendar. Oh my gosh, it's been at least 3 weeks. It's getting close to a month. But the Champion Carnival is on, and I do plan on doing a review of that. Maybe I'll do like 2 reviews, one like halfway through and give my predictions of where it's going, and then I'll give a final review of everything overall once it's finished. And so I still think it's like, while people are waiting for the Champions Carnival shows to come out, maybe I could get that review out even though it's so late. Again, I've been really slack, dealing with all the New Japan shows that have been coming out as well. I do also plan on doing like a mini episode where I review WrestleMania, maybe doing like, 20 minutes or 30 minutes max, just running through that total 10-hour show or something ridiculous. I did end up watching every match except for the kickoff shows. I don't know if I can be bothered sitting through all of those, but I do think I'll maybe just as like a little random thing, like, oh, here's this guy, he only really reviews and actually consistently watches pro res. Let's see what he thinks of, the US stuff. Does he actually enjoy WrestleMania? Does he actually appreciate WWE stuff? Hey, I'm not going to give it away now. You'll just have to listen to the mini review when it comes out. Yeah, that's pretty much all from me, guys. Thanks for joining me once again. You can follow me on Twitter at PureGradePuro. That's PureGrade Puro. I don't actually post like consistent updates and, my thoughts on whatever wrestling match I'm watching that day. I really just update about when my shows are coming out, that sort of thing, and, provide links to those shows on Podbean and YouTube. You can also follow me on, speaking of which, Podbean, iTunes, and YouTube. Just search Pure Grade Pro Wrest. My links will be in the description of wherever you are, unless you're listening to this via Extreme Wrestling Torrents, just because they don't allow you to put links, and I totally understand, because then it's like, you're just advertising yourself on the site, through the description. So yeah, thanks for joining me, guys. I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye forever. See you soon. See you guys next time when I give you another review, hopefully of some fun pro wrestling.